Good morning, boys and girls. Friendship according to Humphrey, Chapter 1, as promised. Bump, bump, bump. Mrs. Brisbane and I were headed back to Longfellow School after the long winter holiday, but there are a lot more bumps in the road since the last time I rode in her small blue station wagon. Just going to pause there for a second. When I was a little kid, I used to ride the school bus with actually Mr. Larry. He was a little bit younger than me, but we rode the bus together. And our bus driver would fly over the frost heaves in the road. His name was Louis Lull, and the bus would go flying over these frost heaves, and we would fly up and pretend we hit our heads on the ceiling of the bus. And oh, it was crazy. I think that's what the bumps are in this chapter. Mrs. Lewis was making a little connection. Now, Humphrey, Mrs. Brisbane said, don't be surprised if there are a few changes in room 26. My stomach felt queasy as I hung on to my ladder, so I had a hard time understanding what she was telling me. What did she mean by changes? While you were home with Bert, I came back to school to get things all set. I was home with her husband Bert a lot over the holidays, and as much as I like him, I was worn out from running mazes a couple of times a day. Mr. Brisbane loves to watch me run mazes. At least back in school, I could catch 40 winks once in a while, and since I'm a classroom hamster, I belong in the classroom. My stomach calmed down a bit as Mrs. Brisbane pulled her car into a parking space. Now, what about these changes? What are you expecting? She asked. But I asked her what was going on, which came out squeak, squeak, squeak as usual. It's good to shake things up once in a while, Humphrey. You'll see. She opened the car door. I was already shaken up from that bumpy ride, and a blast of icy wind made me shiver. I couldn't see a thing because Mrs. Brisbane threw a wool scarf over my cage, and I didn't mind as long as I was on my way back to the classroom to see all my friends. It gave me a warm feeling, or maybe the heat from the school furnace as we walked in the front door. Hi, Sue. Are we on for today? A familiar voice called out. It was Miss Loomis. I recognized her voice. She taught a class down the hall. Sure, Angie. What about after morning recess? See you then, said Miss Loomis. Finally, Mrs. Brisbane set my cage down in room 26 and removed the scarf. I was in for a shock. Something unsqueakable had happened to my classroom. For one thing, the table faced the wrong direction. They used to point towards the front of the room, and now they were all sideways. Instead of being arranged in neat rows, the tables were clumped together in groups. Mrs. Brisbane's desk had moved to the corner of the room. Pictures of people I'd never seen before replaced the happy snowmen that had been on the bulletin board in December. I was so dizzy from the changes I didn't notice the room filling out until I heard Lower Your Voice AJ yelling, Hiya, Humphrey! As he came out of the cloakroom. Soon all my other friends stopped in to say hello. Did you have a good vacation? Asked Miranda Golden. Miranda is an almost perfect human. That's why I think of her as Golden Miranda. My mother says to tell you hi, says Speak Up Saya in her soft, sweet voice. Hey, ya Humpty Dumpty, shouted Garth. That made Gail snicker, but I didn't mind. She laughed at everything. Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, ya Humphrey Dumpty. At that moment the bell rang. Class, look for your names and take your seats now, said Miss Brisbane. There was a lot of thumping and bumping as everyone got into their seats. They now had a better view of some students who sat on the opposite side of the room. But don't complain, Mandy Payne, Sit Still Seth Stevenson, and I heard that Kirk Chen were, oh gosh, I messed that sentence up. Let me try it again. I had a better view of some of the students who used to sit on the opposite side of the room. I think it's good to shake things up once in a while. I noticed something odd. There was a stranger in room 26. Miss Brisbane, she doesn't belong here. She's in the wrong room, I squeaked. Class, as you can see, we're making new changes this year. One of our changes is a brand new student. Come here, Tabitha. The girl seemed scared as she got up and stood next to Mrs. Brisbane. This is Tabitha Clark. I want you all to welcome her. Tabitha, why don't you tell us something about yourself? The new girl looked down and shook her head. Well, we'll do that later. Now, who would like to be in charge of showing Tabitha around today? Me! A voice called out. It was Raise Your Hand Heidi Hopper, who always forgets to raise her hand. Hands, please, Heidi. I think Mandy had her hand up first. Mandy, you will be Tabitha's buddy. I expect each of you to introduce yourself to Tabitha and include her in your activities. I know you'll make a lot of good friends in room 26. You may sit down now, Tabitha." The girl kept staring at the floor, returned to her seat. Looked like she needed a friend. I was so busy watching her, I only half listened to what Mrs. Brisbane was saying. What was she talking about? Poultry. "After all, this is Longfellow School. I hope you know that Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was a famous American poet." Oh, poetry. That had nothing to do with chickens or turkeys, thank goodness. I had to admit I'm a little scared of things with feathers since my early days at Pet-O-Rama. I have nightmares about the day a large green parrot escaped, flung himself at my cage, squeaking. That unpleasant memory was interrupted when someone blurted, "I'm a poet and I don't know it. My feet show it. They're long fellows." "I heard that, Kirk. Now, as I was saying, much of this term will be spent reading and writing poetry." Everyone groaned. Seth squirmed in his seat. "Poetry," he moaned. "Sit still, Seth." Sitting wasn't easy for Seth. Now that he was practically right in front of me, I could see him wiggling and jiggling in his chair, and that made Gail Morgenstern laugh. "Stop giggling, Gail." Gail stopped giggling and started hiccuping. "Please go get a drink of water. Tabitha, please put that away," she said to the new girl. Everyone stared at Tabitha. She was cradling a scruffy stuffed bear in her arms. The gray bear had cotton coming out of his ears and wore washed-out blue overalls with a button missing. Even his smile seemed a little faded. "Now, please." It was quiet, thank goodness. I'm afraid if Gail had been there, we would have heard her heaps of hiccups. Tabitha slid the bear into the slot in her table without a word, and Principal Morales marched through the door. "Sorry for interrupting, Mrs. Brisbane. Just wanted to personally welcome y'all back to school." The principal looked spiffy with a tie that had pencils all over it. "Thank you, Mr. Morales. We have a new student, Tabitha Clark, and a whole new setup for our class, as you can see." "Well, welcome, Tabitha. I'm sure you'll love it here in room 26. I'm glad to see your friend Humphrey is back as well." He walked all the way across the classroom to my cage. "Glad to see you," I squeaked in my loudest voice. "How you doing there, old pal? You can all learn a lot from Humphrey, and I wish you all a very successful semester." After he left, I turned my attention back to Tabitha. She was staring straight down. Her face was almost as red as her copper-colored hair. Suddenly, the recess bell rang. "Come on, Tabitha, let's get our coats," Mandy said. Tabitha slipped the stuffed bear into her pocket and followed Mandy to the cloakroom. Soon as the students were gone, Miss Loomis bustled in. Two pink dots of excitement colored her cheeks, and her curls bounced in all directions. "Are you ready? Should we do it?" Mrs. Brisbane asked excitedly. "Why not? I'll make room for him now," said the teacher. They walked over to the table where my cage sits. "I'm sure he'll fit right here," said Miss Loomis, pointing to a spot near my house. Now you're sure he's not a lot of trouble?" "Oh, no, not nearly as much trouble as a hamster." What, I thought to myself, since when have I caused trouble in room 26? When I did not totally dedicate myself to helping the classmates and the teacher. Surprisingly, Miss Brisbane did not correct her. I wondered who was in as much trouble as I am. "He," Miss Loomis said. "He who," I thought to myself. "Now, class, I told you there were some changes in our room this year. Another of the changes is a brand new classroom pet. I think he'll add a lot to room 26. New classroom pet? What did she want a new pet for when we had a wonderful, terrific classroom pet, namely me?" Miss Loomis entered carrying a large glass tank. I couldn't see what it was because my classmates were standing up, craning their necks, oohing and eyeing. "It's a frog!" shouted Heidi. Miss Loomis set a box right next to my cage that was glass, and all I could see was water, rocks, and something green, and it was really, really, really lumpy. "Meet our new frog. Miss Loomis will tell you all about him." "Well, boys and girls, as you may know, we have a frog in our classroom, and his name is George. He's a bullfrog. Right before the holidays, one of our students brought in this frog to keep George company. We named him Og the Frog. Unfortunately, George didn't like Og, and being a bullfrog, George let us know that he didn't like Og by making a lot of noise. This upset Og, because he would leap and splash all day long when George was croaking. Everyone laughed, but I didn't. With all the noise, we were having trouble getting work done, So I asked Mrs. Brisbane if your class would like to have Og, and she said yes. He's a very quiet frog. Do you like him? Everyone yelled out yes, except Tabitha. Something went ribbit ribbit in a funny croaking voice. It wasn't the frog. I heard that, Kirk. That's quite enough. Og can provide sound effects from now on. I think he'll make a nice friend for Humphrey. A new friend for me? At least he wasn't my replacement. After Miss Loomis left, Miss Brisbane let the students have a closer look at Og. Seth tapped on the glass. Don't do that, Seth. You'll frighten him. He doesn't seem frightened of anything, said Miranda. I think he's smiling. That must mean he's hoppy, said Kirk. For once, Gail didn't giggle, which seemed to bother Kirk. Get it? Hoppy? Happy? Gail rolled her eyes and groaned. Come see Og, Tabitha. Tabitha stared at her table and shook her head. Come on, Tabitha, check it out. Again, Tabitha shook her head. She hasn't wanted to do anything all day, said Mandy. Mandy? Is this really a frog, Mrs. Brisbane? Don't frogs live in water? Some do. Some frogs live in trees. Og is a common green frog. He likes to live near the water, but not in it. That's why he has a tank that's half land and half water. A common green frog didn't sound very interesting. Can I take care of Og? Asked AJ. Lower your voice, AJ. We will all take care of him. Once the students returned to their seats, Miss Brisbane held up a book on the care of frogs. We'll have to study this. Taking care of Frog will be quite different from caring for Humphrey. After all, Humphrey is a warm-blooded animal, and Og is a cold-blooded amphibian. Amphibian. That's nothing like a mammal, I thought. It made my warm blood run cold. I hope she would never put that word on the spelling test. Aha, it says the common green frog is a medium-sized frog with a calm nature. It makes a distinctive twanging sound. Boing! I almost fell off my ladder. What was that noise? And then I heard another sound, the laughter. That certainly is a distinctive twanging sound. Boing! The noise was clearly coming from the frog. What kind of a way is that to talk? Shouldn't frogs say ribbit? Thank you for the demonstration, Og, said Mrs. Brisbane. Then I heard boing, boing, boing. I heard that, Kirk Chen, said the teacher. She continued to talk on and on about amphibians and their life cycle. What does he eat? Heidi called out. Hands, please, Heidi. Mostly insects. Mrs. Loomis gave me a container of crickets. Oh, cool. I finished gagging, I squeaked. Live insects? Not that anyone was listening to me. At the end of the day, the students gathered up their books and coats and filed past our table. Bye, Og. Catch you later, Augie. Not one of my classmates said goodbye to me. They all forgot. Mandy stayed after class for a minute. Miss Brisbane, you told me to be friendly to the new girl, but she isn't very friendly back. Don't complain, Mandy. It's not easy to be the new kid in the classroom. Put yourself in her shoes. Give her some time. After all, we've got the whole semester ahead of us. A whole semester, and I had to spend the whole semester with a frog? Mrs. Brisbane shook things up all right, and I felt queasy all over again. And that is the end of chapter 1.